go down. Okay. Oh, all right. All right, Councilor Thompson is just, Texas will be here in 5 minutes, so we'll go ahead and get started without her, and then she can catch up. So, let's go ahead. Mike, you want to call the meeting to order?
Councilor Teacher.
Present.
Councilor Manal.
Here.
Councilor Paul.
Here.
Councilor Ochoa.
Here.
Councilor Moore.
Here.
Thompson's on our way, and then, Mayor Pender.
Here. All right. Let's see, we have approval of minutes. We have our January 18, 2023 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Is there any questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion? Anyone?
I'll move to approve it.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the January 18, 2023 minutes, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, tonight we have no special presentation, so we will move on to open forum. This is the time the council will be happy to receive your comments pertaining to items on the agenda, including questions, suggestions, complaints, and items for the future. Each person's time will be limited to 3 minutes. This is always a difficult time when we have a hybrid model, so we're going to do comments here in the room if there are any, and then we'll move on to those participating by Zoom. Any comments? Nope. All right. Ronnie, if you are watching Zoom and you would like to give a public comment, please indicate by either raising your hand or making a chat, dropping yourself into the chat for Ronnie to review. Give it a few minutes or a minute.
Mrs. Mayor, I don't see any online.
Okay, so there is no public comments this evening. Let's move on. We have no unfinished business, so we're going to move on to new business proclamation. And
You might have some
I asked already, and there was none. Yeah, that's all right. No, I always do people in the room first. No worries. Okay, so who is presenting? I'm presenting this one. Okay. So I have been reached out to by and let's see. Here we go. Here's our proclamation. All right. So April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, and Mike, do you recall who had requested the proclamation?
I can't recall right now.
All right. Apologies to the individual who emailed me and asked for this. I thought it was a good idea. And so a representative of the Michael J. Fox Foundation reached out and asked if King City would observe April as Parkinson's Awareness Month, and therefore I think all thought it was a good idea. I think we've done this before. This is we try to observe causes that are important and affect the residents of King City. We certainly know that Parkinson's is a disease that's prevalent in our community. And so we would like to proceed with proclaiming April as Parkinson's Month. So, Mike, it's been a little while since we've done a proclamation. Do I do a recital? Do we discuss? Remind me.
I just want to read it.
Okay.
And they'll read it into the record and,
All right. So, Proclamation P-2023-01, supporting the designation of April as Parkinson's Awareness Month. Whereas Parkinson's disease is a chronic, progressive neurological disease and is the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States. Whereas the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research is dedicated to finding a cure for Parkinson's disease through an aggressively funded research agenda and to ensure the development of improved therapies for those living with Parkinson's today. Whereas there is an inadequate data on the incidence and prevalence of Parkinson's disease, but it is estimated to affect nearly 1 million people in the United States, including more than 20,000 people in Oregon, and that number is expected to more than double by 2040. Whereas it is estimated that 90,000 individuals are diagnosed annually with Parkinson's disease in North America, 50% higher than the 60,000 annual diagnoses that research previously suggested. Whereas it is estimated that Parkinson's costs $52 billion a year, of which the federal government shoulders $29 billion, leaving American families to cover the remaining $29 billion. Whereas it is estimated that more than 1.6 million people in the United States will be impacted by Parkinson's disease by 2037 at an estimated economic burden of $80 billion. Whereas there is no known cure or drug to slow or halt the progression of the disease, and available treatments are limited in their ability to address patients' medical needs and remain effective over time. Whereas the City of King City recognizes the efforts of the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research as it leverages its core values of optimism, urgency, resourcefulness, collaboration, accountability, and persistence in a problem solving to work on behalf of the 6 million people worldwide living with Parkinson's. Whereas increased research, education, and community support services are needed to find more effective treatments and to provide access to quality care to those living with the disease today. Now, therefore, I, Jamie Fender, Mayor of the City of King City, do by proclaim April as Parkinson's Awareness Month in 2023. Given under my hand in these free United States in the City of King City on this day of 2023, and to which I have caused the seal of the city to be affixed and have made this proclamation public. Yeah, thank you. We thank the, we thank the Michael J. Fox Foundation for bringing this to our attention, and apologies again. We will correct the record at the next council meeting with the individual's name who sought that out. So apologies to them personally. All right. Okay, now to our next order of business, which is a difficult one. There's no way around it. So, Mike, you want to come up and join us?
Jury box?
There's no jury. Just sit closer so we can talk. I mean, there's no, you can have the podium if you want, but it's just kind of hard to see you.
I give a microphone.
Yeah, do we have them? Yeah, we could do that, or wherever you're most comfortable.
You want to stand on this mic, you can use this, or you can have a seat either way. This fine?
Yeah.
Whatever's fine. I mean, so, thank you for joining us tonight. You know, this is, I think, a disappointment for all of us to find ourselves in this position. I will speak on behalf of myself, but the other counselors will have an opportunity to ask questions and provide comment soon. I think there are two general concerns. And in articulating, I think the first concern, just overall, which we talked about at your appointment to the Planning Commission, right, is the unique position that you're in, that you are an owner of a significant parcel of land that will be impacted one way or the other. To the extent is unknown, right? But you are going to be personally impacted. And that causes in itself a conflict, whether we want to call it a potential conflict, an actual conflict, whatever it is still a conflict, to which we talked about it a lot, right? So And I think between your, the appointment process and now, I think there has become some developments that make it very murky as to what is your primary, what is your primary goal as sitting on the council, or on the commission, excuse me. And you have always been very candid and upfront and honest and straightforward about your concerns about your own property and the advocacy of which you have spoken about how your own property is going to be affected. And what we had hoped was, because you do bring a missing voice to the Planning Commission, and I think what we all had hoped was you could separate out, right, all your personal impacts from the work that is needed on the Planning Commission. And for me personally, I think we have come to a conclusion that I don't think that is working. And the reason I think it's not working is because of an email that you sent to Steve Faust that outlines your concerns, and I just will be candid with you. I think it was a highly inappropriate email to be sent from a planning commissioner, and I don't know where Mike Meyer, owner of parcel of land, and Mike Meyer, planning commissioner, starts and stops. And there was nothing in that information that gave me any indication of where and in what hat were you wearing. So I'd like to bring up the email so we can talk about it, right? Because it's the email that really, for me, set this into motion. So if you can bring it up so we can just kind of go through it. Or Ron, I don't know.
I don't have it. You guys have it, was never scanned.
Well, I know the email you're talking about.
Give me the ability to start off.
Okay. I think, it would be,
So, I mean, is this Exhibit A that you're bringing up? I have a handful of exhibits myself.
Sure. And this isn't a recognized judicial proceeding, right? I'm not a judge. You are.
But I would like to address the email.
Sure. Well, then I think we should just bring it up so that we can read through it and then we can go line by line. So. Mhm.
Do you have the date of the email?
We'll put it up.
I was waiting for that. You brought up some other points.
Sure.
And when we talk about, what hat am I wearing, I think I've been pretty clear as far as when I'm speaking from a planning commissioner standpoint, when I'm talking from. We all know that I've been on the stakeholder advisory committee, and on that committee, I speak as a landowner. And I know that I stepped up to the podium at one of the last community meetings, speaking as a landowner. So I try to make the distinction very clear. And I think one of the responsibilities that I have going into the hearing process, acting as a planning commissioner, regarding the subject, is to make sure that I put those things aside, as any juror would in a court of law, and put those things aside and make an impartial and unbiased decision. And you have to make a commitment for that, and I have made that commitment. So, we have the email up now, so.
Okay. And I would, because you made the reference to a jury, I would just say this, right? I'm sure you've served on jury duty before, right? When you go into a jury, right, the judge has a huge preamble, and we go through the process called voir dire, right, which allows the judge and the two attorneys to sit and talk to jurors about their experiences, their conflicts of interest, their biases, all of that. So, candidly, right, certainly, I don't, Peter being the only other attorney I know in here, right, like, if this was a legal proceeding, you wouldn't make it on the jury because you already have a conflict, right? So
But I made it on the planning commission.
You did, and
And all those things were
Correct.
considered at that time.
they were, with some caveats that we will get to. Okay, so here's the email, okay? So, it's on, the date is February 2nd, okay? And I'm having a hard time here. All right. So, you say, so this is so prior to this, just for everyone's clarification, my understanding, and you help me if I'm wrong, but some information off of a map came about, and you reached out to Steve Faust after hearing some information from a neighbor. I think it was the setting. He wrote you back, and I think this is your reply back to him. Is that a fair?
Yes, and also specifically referring to parks in the area.
Right.
And there's a round circle at Dot where the park was planned,
Okay.
and then a service area around that.
Okay.
And so basically, Steve was saying that the park on my property was identified by that map. And I said, no, that's a service area
Okay.
for that park. Specifically, that park was placed somewhere else.
Right.
So I said that for your information and your planning purposes, I have no intention for my property to be a park.
Right.
So you identified the park being somewhere else. This is a service area for that park. So if you're planning, put that park somewhere else because I'm not interested in it being on my property.
Okay.
And that's,
There's a context that led to this email. Is that
Exactly.
up to that? Okay. I just wanted, it's only fair to put it in context, right?
yes, and so the park
Right.
wasn't identified, it was identified elsewhere.
Okay.
And I was trying to make the distinction that the park was elsewhere and not on my property.
Okay. I got it. All right. So here's how we would.
And then you later came back and said, my mistake, you're
Mhm.
right. Property's within the service area for that identified.
Got it. All right. So, here we say, well, Steve, that circle showed up as a community park in the concept plan and at the intersection of 147th and Meyer Lane and not along the river. I find it extremely audacious for you to specifically identify my property as the location of the river park when landowners west of 150th are making deals with the developers on 2,200 square feet of river frontage.
Linear feet.
Oh, I can't see it from linear feet?
Well, it's 2,200 feet.
200
Oh,
feet.
got it, okay. All right, when you say that I know no development will take place until such time I sell or develop it, I'm not so sure that is correct. Early on in this process, there were statements that eminent domain would not be used, but those words are starting to slip out. You make these assurances, but what you say has no legal basis, and you can't speak for city leaders in the future. Would the city be willing to make a legally binding commitment that eminent domain will not be used anytime in our future? Okay. You go on to say, my property may look really nice because it has a flat spot, but so does every property in that 2,200 stretch, to include the O'Halloran property, which you also toured. There are other properties which you did not tour as well that would all be suitable locations that you have not thought of as something that can be handled by local tree code, as you suggest when Title 13 was brought up at the SAC and TAC. All right. Mike, can you scroll down?
Jamie,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read the last part of that paragraph again.
Oh, did I mess up? Okay.
Keep in mind that, that area of my property is Class 1 riparian and can't be simply thought of as something that can be handled by local tree code, as you suggested when Title 13 was brought up at the SAC and TAC.
Oh, apologize. Thank you. It's hard to get I also need better, stronger glasses. All right. I find it interesting that for 4 years, I and others have tried to participate and to be collaborative, and in return, we get these last-minute bombshells with the response that you should have been clear. A warning regarding your plans for my property may have been a courteous step to take. I've drawn your attention to many flaws in your circulation analysis, promoting alternative to, but rather than acknowledge that they aren't supportive of your conclusions, they get modified. And Sylvester's explanation that looped roads are cul-de-sacs is just one example that comes to mind. This east-west roadway started off as having an alternative for connectivity in case Beef Bend were to be closed. Now we have 3 major road crossings, crossing ravines, and the persistent choice of crossing the conservation easement. The effort here has not been to fight King City, but to develop a plan that we can all live with and at the same time achieve a functional plan for the city. A plan that is achievable and accepted is the desired outcome. We and the area will forever be affected by the 3,600 homes and everything that comes along with that. The city in return needs to acknowledge this forced sacrifice and make some minor adjustments in order to prevent a future of disagreement, litigation, and bad blood running through the city. I suggest you look at other alternatives for a riverside park. If what you say is correct, the city will be lacking one of the future parks because you didn't listen. You can make plans, but once identified, I can make plans as well. Please pay attention to what's being said now and abandon my scorched earth push. Any scorched earth push that may prove costly in the future. So, the concern, Mike, that I have with this is, one, I cannot tell in what capacity you're writing this email.
Well, it's not from my city email, it's from my personal email. I'm speaking as a property owner,
Okay.
this is the fact I'm a planning commissioner. I'm trying to point out the inconsistencies in what's being said, and you're not identifying Steve Faust's email, which has some of those inconsistencies in it, nor some of the other inconsistencies that I found throughout this planning process that I brought to his attention, where I can pull out all those emails too, where he's like, yeah, you're right, sorry, I made a mistake.
Okay.
So there's been plenty of those as well.
Okay.
And I will point out, in this planning commissioner handbook, which I found to be very helpful, is that, to make their opinions, in this case, I'm not really a decision maker, I'm making a recommendation. Opinions in this arena are acceptable, even expected. Conflicts of interest on a matter, however. So, it also talks about, bias is expected in this process. So we're talking about, and that's why I point out the 5 pages that I've given to all of you, that this is a legislative process where bias and opinions are part of it, right? Even from somebody like me, who is on the commission. So biases and opinions are to be expected, and that's what I'm explaining here, again, as a property owner. So, once again, I'm cognizant of the hats that I put on.
Mm-hmm.
I was merely pointing out the fact that to a neighbor that Mike Myers property for a park,
Mm-hmm.
which then I was alerted to. It's like, what are they talking about, a park on my property? Because everything that I've heard so far from the city is, which just conveyed to me in an email just recently, is your property or landowner's properties will only be developed if you develop it or you choose to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been the consistent message. And I've also pointed back to the planning commission workshop that you all had. And you talked about eminent domain. And there were commitments made by this council that basically said, we don't want to go there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a property owner, then, well, I guess I'm going to say as somebody on the planning commission, that doesn't really convey a sense of certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when Mike Weston mentioned in his letter to the OGEC something about purchasing my property, then how do I weigh that comment in the OGEC letter, about potential purchasing my property that creates a conflict, and how do I weigh that against what this council has said in the past regarding eminent domain? And that to me is uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about actual versus potential conflict of interest, you're talking about certainty, right? And the OGEC points that out in their advice letter, which was not a determination letter, by the way, which was mischaracterized by the city attorney as a determination letter, and it was not. And they were very clear when I talked to them. They said, we made it very clear to the city that this is an advice letter. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you have a potential or actual conflict of interest. And I've spent the last few weeks,
Mhm.
going over this, consulted my own attorney,
Mhm.
and talked to OGC personally, and others have as well. And coming from the director of the OGC is, you don't have a potential conflict of interest. Make sure that you make your proclamation, and make sure that you make a decision that, you know, meets your fiduciary responsibility of being impartial.
Right.
And I wholeheartedly can say to you, all of you, that I will be impartial in my decision making.
So how do you reconcile what you've just said to us with the statement of, you know, litigation, scorched earth, and,
Well,
I mean, I don't read that. I'll be candid, Mike. I don't read that
I'm
email
not saying
as
that I'm gonna litigate. What I'm
Let's go
saying-
back.
Okay.
Go back up a little bit, please. Okay, so, let me find the spot again.
I mean,
So here we go. Last, the city in return needs to acknowledge this forced sacrifice and make minor adjustments in order to prevent a future of disagreement, litigation, and bad blood running through this city.
I'm talking about the community as a whole.
Okay,
And I think that the city needs to be cognizant of when we're making decisions, how those impacts may be future, how they'll be viewed.
okay. So that's not how I read this. That's not how I take it.
Well, that's
We
not-
all, and that's fine, but you're the sender, you know what's in your own mind, right?
Yeah.
I am the receiver of the information,
Right.
and I can tell you what my reaction or receipt of that is, right? They're not necessarily going to match. And here's where I have an issue, right? We already know, right? And I am going to say Rivermead collectively, because we have received letters on behalf of Rivermead collectively who have hired an attorney and who have threatened to sue. We know that suit is most likely, you know, it's anyone's right to file a lawsuit. They are free to do so. We already know that is most likely what's going to happen because they've threatened to do it several times, right? So you don't live within Rivermead, but I think it's a fair characterization to say that you have been adjacent to or in connection with some of the, an agreement with, right, some of the frustration and upset and opposition. You know, I mean, it's hard to separate out the last several years between you and Rivermead, right, just because I think there has been a collective kind of effort.
I don't know how you can make that connection. I mean, I don't live in Rivermead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm my own independent person with my own independent thoughts on things.
Sure.
So I'm not part of Rivermead, therefore I'm not part of that lawsuit or that hiring of an attorney.
And I'm glad to confirm that he is not part of Rivermead.
We know he doesn't live in Rivermead, and I understand he's not,
Part of Rivermead.
okay.
Okay, so, I mean,
But Mike, over the years, and I don't want to get too far afield, right? There have been communications over the years at which you've taken the opportunity to represent other people's collective interests or collective thoughts, concerns, frustration, anger, upset.
You and I have had meetings together where you and I have talked,
Mhm.
and you shared a lot of the same opinions that I had.
We have certainly shared a lot of opinions.
Right.
We have,
So,
you know.
I mean, who's to say our opinions really even matter, and what opinions did you and I agree upon? I mean, we could analyze, you know, our conversations that we've had, and our last one was about 2 hours long, hour and a half, 2 hours long, where we shared a lot of different things.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's no recording of that discussion you and I had,
Mhm.
but I remember that we had a lot of agreements on things about how things ought to happen. And so, you know, again, that was just two people sharing their opinions. You know, I wasn't acting as a planning commissioner, you weren't acting as the mayor.
Mhm. Right.
We were just two people sharing opinions.
Mhm.
And I think that the process shows that I can have my opinions, I can have my bias.
Mhm.
But I think when I act as a planning commissioner, I have to have that separation. And what I'm pledging to you all, and which I pledged at the very beginning of this process, that I can do that.
And I think what I'm telling you is that based on emails like this, right, based on other,
As a property owner,
as a property owner, I'm finding it difficult to reconcile conduct with words. And I can tell you that when I read this, so I was so concerned by this email that I sent this email to the Oregon Ethics Commission. And in return, what I was told was in order for them to provide me an opinion on a specific question like this, right, that I would have to file a complaint and then they would give me an actual opinion, a determination. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't, that seems a little extreme when this all seems very simple.
yes.
And I don't think that we need an ethics opinion or an ethics determination letter to let us know that it is a very difficult position for someone to be in that has a very, if not the most impacted property in the UBG, certainly one of them. I think that's a fair characterization of your property. I think yours and Carla Bankston's property are probably the ones that are going to be potentially most impacted, depending on how it all shakes out. And
Yeah, and you said potentially impacted. So, I mean, that's the key word, right? Was potentially impacted.
but Mike, the problem,
There's no certainty to it. So, I mean, you basically want to eliminate me from the process based on your opinion, which doesn't match that of the OGEC in terms of certainty and potential versus actual.
so your,
Can I step in?
yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So OGEC hasn't offered an opinion, just like they haven't offered a determination. They've recited all the stuff we can read anywhere, right?
Mhm.
One thing that I personally did not consider, that I learned from this statement, from the, did I get it right?
And you're going to talk about detriment.
Yeah, avoidance of detriment is not something that I considered as a counselor when we were talking about your employment. And so, is there any, can you think of any plan that the city could put forward that would include your property that you would approve as a planning commissioner?
Are you talking about my property specifically?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is a broad-based plan. TSP and master plan is a broad-based plan. So my property isn't specifically mentioned in any of this. Okay? It's not a zoning change, it's not annexation, it's not Mike Meyer tax lot number or whatever, right? That comes under quasi-judicial process. This is a broad geographic area with a basic plan. An attorney that I consulted basically said, this is a plan, this is a planning process. And because of that, a legislative process, and there was potential conflict, and I'm
I'm glad to hear you saying that you now view the master planning process in that way.
Yeah.
In the past, when we've met, you had a lot of concerns about what the plan looked like because of where the lines were, right?
Well, back then, you and I was talking as a property owner, and I was a planning commissioner, right?
Okay, so I'd like to ask you a question.
And things have evolved since
Yeah,
then.
okay,
so, yeah.
okay. So then, as a planning commissioner, you would be okay with a line on a map that went through you as a property owner's property?
I would have to be at this point, yes.
Okay, why?
Why would I be okay with it?
So why would you have to be okay with it?
Because it's, I've tried to convey the fact that I realize that there will be an east-west connection. I've not been a supporter, and again, I'm not talking as a planning commissioner, I'm talking as a property owner, right? That I've been a supporter of and having an alternative east-west connection. believe, as I've talked with Jamie before and some of you, that I think that a Fisher Road extension is gonna happen. I'm not against a Fisher Road extension. So, you know, when this whole process began, you know, I started back in the mid-nineties, fighting the UGB expansion, right? I didn't want the UGB expansion, but it happened, right? So then QC started their concept planning process, where 3,300 to 3,600 homes were coming. I want 3,300 to 3,600 homes, right? But that ship has sailed, right? Now 3,300 to 3,600 homes are coming. It's an evolution, right? So now, you know, we're talking about roads. You know, if you were to ask me 10 years, 15 years ago, hell no, I don't want to road there. But the process has gone on and developed. So, you know, as each step is taken, you know, there's a new reality, right? So, and I've tried to adapt to those realities. I'm not no houses, you know, I mean, not no UGB. Those ships have already sailed. So I'm trying to adapt to these things as they come. I'm trying to be reasonable about the reality of things and what's the best plan. And I've tried to convey that from the very beginning, is that I want what's best for the city and its residents and the future residents. Period. I want it to be a place where my grandson wants to continue to live. So I want to have a voice in that process. So, you know, it'll be nice when we get past all this and we can get into the actual planning phase of the city and get past, you know, these contentious issues. And again, you know, I'm one voice on the planning commission, making a recommendation. You all wanted to have a different perspective, and you've got it from me. You don't want to operate in a vacuum. And if we're going to point to one email, you know, that I said something in response to something that was incorrect by Steve Faust, that's unfortunate. That you're going to jump on, you know, one sentence of one of the emails that I sent out. I mean, I can point to a lot of different things, recordings and whatnot. I try to give you all, I don't know how many of you read my 5 pages. Hopefully you did. And I try to give accountings of specifically when things were said at certain times, to give you all, you know, a foundation of what it is that I'm concerned about. But, you know, can I point to the eminent domain, you know, work session and what was said then and say, well, look at this. This is what you said then, and hold you to it? Can I hold you to no eminent domain? Because you said, oh, no, you know, and Keith Light said, I've never even heard anybody even discuss eminent domain in the past, and I've been a planner for a long, long time. But now eminent domain is creeping up. Now, can I point to that council session and say, well, look, this is what you guys said. So how come you're talking about eminent domain right now? And when you're pointing to my email right now, you're saying, well, you said, you know, this or that. I mean, it's an evolution, right? All I'm saying to you is, I've laid out my case. The OGEC says it's up to me. You're citing misconduct or non-performance of duty. You know, that's why I'm here today. And something, you know, regarding actual conflict, which, according to you, at your last meeting, you said he hasn't had any actual conflict of interest violations. But now we're preemptively trying to figure out what I might do next week. And I don't, does anybody think there's misconduct or non-performance of duty on my part?
Here's our concern, and I think.
Hang on.
Okay.
I'm not quite done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Can you speak to the avoidance of financial detriment part? Because I have tried to put myself in your shoes, and I would love to be in your shoes, but I cannot figure out how I could say that there's not an actual conflict for avoidance of financial detriment. That's the sticking point for me that I cannot.
Is it going to be detrimental? Is this plan going to be detrimental to me? I'm asking you, Kate.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too, right? I mean, but it's uncertain, right? That's what it comes down to, is the uncertainty of it. And if you read the OGEC letter, when it comes to conflict of interest, actual or potential, it has to be certain. You know, what's the certainty of it being detrimental? I have no idea. And again, it's a broad-based plan where we're talking about 10,000 feet lines on a map. It's a broad-based plan. There's nothing certain. There's nothing specific. my property's not being specifically identified. So, I mean, later on, I can see we'll have an actual conflict, right? If I'm retained on the planning commission and have an opportunity to go through and be a part of the actual planning on certain parcels or annexation of certain parcels, then at some point, you're gonna be looking at my parcel, and I'm gonna say, sorry, I have to recuse myself because I have an actual conflict of interest.
Last question I think I have, and when I read the email, it made me feel uncomfortable too. And it's tough when it's an email or a text message or something where it's not your voice,
Right.
your actual voice, and if we had had you read this letter, you know, it might have been different than hearing Jamie read it, than what I heard in my own head when I read it. I would like to ask you to kind of explain what was in your mind when you made the statement about preventing the future of disagreement litigation in Southwood. What were you thinking about?
Well, I have to go back to the beginning when this all started, and we talked about, you know, a small community and working together, being collaborative, and I've tried to convey that desire to be collaborative and whatnot. And I think it's unfortunate when lawyers are being hired, you know, by Rivermead, and there's talk about the conservation easement and whatnot. I think that's unfortunate, right? And I think also, you know, we had that whole to-do about the Fisher Road extension signs. And there was a lot of, you know, confrontational or conflict going on. And Jamie and I, you know, we talked about it, and Jamie said, I would really like those signs to come down. So I talked to my neighbors, and what do?
Yeah.
The signs came down, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, ideally, we don't have this conflict, right? It's like, what can we do to avoid this? What can we do to avoid litigation? You know, and so I guess I was coming from that standpoint of, this is unfortunate, right? Why do we have to be in this situation in a small community when, you know, Jamie and I had our conflicts. We were on Nextdoor on social media. Social media is a bad place to be sharing ideas, right? Right. So Jamie and I were butting heads, and we went down and had a beer down at the Mexican place, and after an hour and a half, we understood each other, right? Why can't we do that? Why can't we sit down and have these talks and discussions and communications, you know? And that's part of the deal why I brought up this whole work session thing. It's like, let's have an opportunity to talk about things, and then next thing you know, the whole agenda's been changed. We didn't have that opportunity, which was really unfortunate, because I think it's important to share ideas, perspectives. Then, when it comes down to sitting down and make decisions, we've heard everybody. And it seems like that process has been shut down to some extent. And that's really unfortunate, because I think that a lot of good comes from discussions and sharing opinions and ideas and whatnot, and...
Well, and it would feel like it has changed for you because as a planning commissioner, you don't get to go have a beer with me and talk about it.
I mean, that's been the downside, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I try to also convey in this 5 pages is that I've basically been sitting on sidelines, you know, since I was appointed, and not really being able to freely discuss anything. I felt like I haven't been freely. So we've had the community meetings, I'm sitting on the sidelines, like, oh man, I'd really like to say something right now. You know, and after the one over at Deer Creek School, I went up to talk to Keith Light, and I said, I really wanted to get up and say something, would have been inappropriate for me, and I was asking Keith, you know, but I wasn't asking else. He said, no, I think it would have been okay. But even at the last one, you know, I got up and I said, hey, I'm a property owner, and I just want some clarification on something as far as businesses go. I get in the weeds with anybody on, you know, I think this or I think that or whatever. I try to be, you know, taking it in, and I think that I'm in a really good position because I've read the circulation analysis, I've read the draft TSP, I've read the master plan, you guys know I've been on all these meetings. You know, and I've taken my planning commissioner responsibilities very seriously. I've been to all the meetings. I I read all the information, I drove by the Habitat for Humanity place just to get a look at it. You know, I take it seriously, I take my responsibility seriously. And I tried to be, part of the discussion, asking questions or whatnot. So, you know, I'm trying to be a part of the process. And I'm not trying to hinder the process, I'm not trying to sabotage the process. All I'm trying to do is, you know, be that voice for the 528 acres of the expansion area. And I just think it's unfortunate that, you know, it's being viewed as being sinister or trying to accomplish something, or, you know, I'm going to do a mind melt on the other planning commissioners, or, you know, do something, you know, that is completely not the case, you know, from my perspective, of what, the way I think. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did.
No, go ahead.
I think, and you and I've talked in the past, we haven't, of course, had a chance to much recently, but, we did when we took the tour, and we have on other occasions, and I really do value the voice that you have for the expansion area and where you come from with it. And I'm sorry to keep coming back to one single letter, but it does provide concerns, and that's what prompted a lot of this. And one of the things that to me was a concern is the kind of the suggestions of that there are other suitable locations for the park, and that, you know, I suggest you look at alternatives to Riverside Park, which is directly related to your property and to your concern as a landowner, when the guidance from I'm going to butcher it as well. OGEC. One of the last paragraphs here says, per ORS 244.040, planning commissioner will need to refrain from taking any actions that could provide a financial benefit or avoidance of financial detriment to the planning commissioner if that financial benefit or avoidance of detriment would not otherwise be available but for holding their official position. Then it goes on to say, for example, if the planning commissioner were to suggest changes to the plan that would result in their property being protected or perhaps less impacted by the plans, that could be considered an attempt to use their position to obtain a financial gain or avoidance of financial detriment available but for holding their position. And that's where reading both of those in together. And that's what I was moving.
So a change to the plan, there was no change to the plan. It didn't suggest a change to the plan. I was pointing out that that wasn't the plan, that he had made a mistake, right? But he specifically identified my property, so I did address that. And so from the very beginning, I said, let's make sure we have the correct plan, right? Let's not jump into a plan that we have to modify later, right? It's like, all right, so I'm going to build a house, and I hire an architect, and we have the plans drawn, and I start lining up contractors and whatnot. And then we find out later, it's like, oh God, we made a mistake, you know, and this wall should have been here or whatever, and now we got to modify things, right? So from the very beginning, I've been saying, let's get a plan right from the very beginning. A correct plan, one that doesn't have to be like modified later, because we know that once a plan is established, you kind of track that plan. So I guess my point there was, you've got 2,200 feet property that developers, you know, that property is all being sold. So if you want to have a proper plan, I'm not planning on selling my property. So if you're identifying my property for a park, you might be better off for a good plan of establishing that park in this other area where the property's all going to be developed, and you're making, you know, deals are being made with developers. So completely from 150th west, all of that land is being developed. Is there a single property owner that's not making a deal with the developer? I'm not aware of them. I think the whole area is being developed. So my point was, is you've got 2,200 feet property, you want a good plan, then you got to be planning a park there, because according to all the information that I've been told is, if you want to develop the property, you don't want to sell it, and it sits there fallow, according to Mike Weston, is coming. So, you know, that tells me, okay, well, I have the right to maintain my property, so if you guys want a good plan, I suggest that you put the park somewhere else in your plan. So that was my point, was, you want a good plan? Don't put the park here, put it over there, although the park, actually on the map, Steve House was incorrect. It was placed somewhere else, but the service area, those larger circles are service areas. I don't know if I satisfied your concern.
Understood, it's just that the way that it came across, though,
I understand.
was as pushing, to move this. Whether it's incorrect or not in the planning documents, or the way it was conveyed, the way that letter reads and the way that it's conveyed in your words to it is suggesting pushing that somewhere else. And that's why I wanted to bring it up and just get an understanding for where you're coming from there.
I think that just highlights the trickiness of determining whether there's a conflict, an actual or perceived, or avoidance of judgment. That just highlights that, because the literal words in the letter are, I suggest you look at other alternatives. Totally hear what you're saying.
Right. That was my,
Right, and I do understand what the intention was, but that's the problem.
But I think it demonstrates our specific concern. I mean, this is, and, Peter wants to speak, but did you have a follow? I don't want to cut you off.
No, that's fine, and I appreciate your explanation. I'm just wanting to point out the way that it reads, and especially in the context of which the paragraph that it's in there as well, it reads as trying to push your suggestion into the plan, whereas this is already.
And he says he was, but the reason is
because it was incorrect.
If you want to park, and I understand that, but it's very difficult to, craft anything around.
but I think we all want a correct plan, right? I mean.
Totally.
So
But Mike, this is not the only change that you've suggested over your time, either before being a planning commissioner or while you're a planning commissioner, right? Like, let's also not revise history, right? There have been many suggestions that have come from you on how you perceive the plan could be better. Is that a fair statement?
I've got a lot of suggestions.
Right.
Sure.
Let's head to Peter, and then we'll.
So I'm the one that created all these problems, because
Yes, thanks very much, Peter.
it was my birthday weekend, and I was in California, and I got a call from Mike, and he was like, hey, there's this, a question about a road alignment. And in my off-the-cuff quick analysis, which is always dangerous, but I don't know that I was wrong. If we have one east-west connector, that's going to be a larger street than, say, a neighborhood street or other roads that are in the plan. And so let's not talk about Mike's property, let's talk about any property in this area. If the road is on your property, it is going to impact your net developable acres. Because on all of these parcels, there are areas that, due to wetlands or other things, aren't going to be developable. So what really matters is net developable acres. So if the road's on your property, regardless of how it gets built, regardless of eminent domain is used, and generally developers develop a road, and when they record the plat, that's when it gets to the city. As a general rule, cities don't build roads, so that's not always true. But whether it's not on your property impacts your net developable acres, and whether it is on your property impacts your net developable acres. So any alignment is going to impact the value of the property because it's going to speak to net developable acres. That is the reason that I suggested that Mike call the OGEC, because in the past, the OGEC has been willing to just provide letter opinions versus force, whether it's a city or a community member or whomever, to file a complaint. And I really wish that we'd go back to that, because oftentimes people are acting in good faith and simply don't know, and this can be counterintuitive. So my, again, birthday weekend off-the-cuff analysis was any alignment, whether positively or negatively, could impact the value of any property in the area. And the other thing is, because I think we're talking a lot about whether a park would get built. And really what we're talking about is zoning. So just because something's zoned park or open space doesn't mean it will ever develop as a park or open space, because as everybody says, a property owner can maintain their current use. Pre-existing non-conforming use is what we call it a lot of times. Again, I'm going to take some blame. What I said to Mike at one point is, if we have owners, and this is, we have having conversations regarding the Bankston property with the land trust. And I said, you know, if they really want to make sure that their land doesn't develop, then in addition to going for a conservation easement, one thing that would make sense would be to zone it as park and open space. You know, that doesn't, the roads that go through parks all the time, but if we're talking about minimal environmental impact, maybe that's a way that we could meet those property owners' needs. And also the needs of the city, because eventually it won't be a pre-existing non-conforming use. And then it can, you know, long after those people are gone, unless it rezones, it can be in somewhat near the condition that maybe they would hope, is non-developed open space. So these are all the ways that, you know, attorneys can think they're being helpful, and then now I'm sitting here, we're having a conversation. But again, I think that the issue of any alignment will obviously impact anyone, any property owner in this area, because sometimes proximity to the infrastructure also matters. So the example I give to people is, in Chicago, property owners want to be within a quarter mile of the L, but they don't want to be immediately adjacent to the L, because then they have trains running past there. So if you look at property values, if you're more than a quarter mile, they start going down again, but if you're right next to it, you know, that can impact. And that's just kind of the market realities. So again, my apologies, though I don't know that I would do anything different.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
What would, and I know that you're just one person and you also don't have a crystal ball,
Right.
but let's say historically speaking, do developers value property a certain way based on whether or not a master plan includes a park on that property? The understanding that that would be a park and not house rooftops.
Well, so what oftentimes happens with developers is that they have to pay SDCs, including park SDCs, and they might say, I'll construct that park for you, city, and donate it to you, and in exchange, I want this amount of SDCs waived, or these amount of SDC credit. Westland, the city of West Lynn has done that before, and then the developers actually sell the credits to the other developers. So the zoning can impact the property's value, certainly. But simply saying like our desire is to have parks. So we want walkable communities, walkable parks. That's not going to impact it. But again, if we have property owners that don't want to develop, then that's a really efficient way to get some of that parkland we want, because we're actually doing them a favor and they're doing us a favor. So that's where, and again, it's zoned that way. Zone park isn't going to happen, but it probably eventually will. And that can impact value as well. But to someone that just wants to preserve the natural features or create community amenities, they're going to be less concerned about end sales price, because they're planning to rely on their life.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand it over to, I have several additional questions, but I'll leave it to everyone else to speak. So anyone else?
So I have a couple of questions here, Mike. I think first, yeah, you probably read more than any of us, and then have done a lot of research in going through the master plan process. Thank you for that. And I know, like you said, you take it seriously with your planning commission role. But on the ORS 244-0401, that second is what stood out to me when I first read it. I'm getting over a cold, that's why the second paragraph, that last sentence, you said, would the city be willing to make a legally binding commitment that eminent domain will not be used anytime in the future? That was to Steve Faust. So what was your thought process behind that?
Back in the zone on that, I guess.
You want to put it back up there? Yeah, you got to scroll down some.
It's on your letter. And
It's right at the, it's like the third page from the bottom, yeah. There you go.
So, I mean, I know what you're talking about, but, I think that, probably my concern was Faust specifically bringing up my property as a park. Right?
And
What the intentions were there. Was he slipping something out, or was he making a mistake?
so you were, yeah,
I think my immediate reaction was, what, the plan to park my property? And then I guess my next thought was, well, the only way they're gonna get it is eminent domain, and they made a commitment not to use eminent domain. So are you gonna make a commitment to not use eminent domain on my property? Because you're kind of maybe suggesting that there will be a park there. So,
And this
I
is
guess-
where your property would make a wonderful park,
well,
right?
and,
So it's like, how do we handle that? Because I would like the ability to say, if Mike ever wants to sell,
right,
however many years from now, that the city has already said that would make a lovely park, you know, but not necessarily say,
we're,
no,
right, yeah, exactly.
you know, so.
But, you know, I mean, you guys know my history, you know,
Yeah.
1880,
Yeah.
7 generations, I mean,
If you're.
it's really a curse for me, because, you know, I'd like to be able to go, hey, you know, give me the money and I'm out of here, right? But I can't do that. Kind of, disservice to my previous generations, right?
Yeah.
And to future.
And that's, and we, as a council, have an obligation to have a plan for what
Right.
happens years and
Exactly.
years from now, too.
So I think what's important to the landowners, some of them, you know, like west of 150th, is like cut and run and have at it, right, blank slate. But I think that you need to be, cognizant of the desires of the other people that live in the area, and not just have the, like I said, scorched, kind of mandates, right? And take all those things into consideration. So, you know, I'm not saying that I won't sell my property one day, because maybe I will. Maybe I'll, you know, one day go, oh my God, I can't stand the noise and the car alarms and the dog barking and whatever. This is not tolerable for me any longer, right? And I go with that point, but it'll be a tough decision, so.
And that's where I guess my overall question is about this process that we are in a, you know, like, I don't want to end up, well, it'll probably be after I'm dead, but I don't want the city to end up in one of those odd cities that's all patched together, right?
Sure.
And there's just, it doesn't make sense, which is why we're doing this whole process.
Exactly, right.
And so I don't know that if there were indeed a park on your property, that means that there's gonna be a bulldozer, like, but also, I wouldn't want to do the darn thing, I would just want to make a little path.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know, Mike, I wish this process were faster so that it would be over.
Well, but we don't want to be too fast, that we do things haphazardly, right?
Right, no, we don't want to do that at all, but this is tough. This is really tough.
Yep, Lori?
I just want to have a couple of comments, and first of all, I have to say that I think your letter to us was, you were trying to be very even keel and present your story very clearly to us. What I have a little issue with is and I agree that this is great, and I thought this is how your approach would be from the very beginning. But I see that when it gets close to you and what might impact your property, then that high-level veneer kind of fades down a little bit, and you're getting a little bit reactive, and I would understand that. That would be me as well. And I think it's the tone of the email, talking about, we better make some minor adjustments to prevent disagreement. What does that mean? So we need to change our plan so that we can adjust to someone else's thought? The same thing with the park. You fully support the idea of planning and how important the planning is, and appreciate that this is a high-level plan to put us in for the next 20 years. But when it gets down to something, a dot on a map that might look like it's on your property, then you're kind of defensive about it. So your impartial view kind of falls away a little bit, and I think that's the concern. It's the tone when it gets close to you personally. Can you step away from that and look at it and keep your larger view position that you've been doing well, but it kind of flips, and I think that's my concern, especially when I look at the letter from Ethics, and as they were referring to it before, is that if the commissioner were to suggest changes to the plan that would result in his property being protected or impacted, then that's a concern. And that, I think, is what we're seeing. Even though your emails to Steve were in your mind, in your position of being a property owner, Steve knows you're also a commissioner. So I don't know how he was taking your comments. So that is my concern. It's a little bit of that.
I wish I could show that reference to the map, because that reference on the map wasn't on my property. So there was a dot, showed the park, and then the service area.
It doesn't really matter, because we are talking about a high-level plan where the dots are going to move and the lines are going to move over the course of the 20 years. Nothing is necessarily, these are just estimates and maybe proposals, nothing final. But you were taking it as pretty personally, which I think is away
because
from
my property is specifically mentioned.
From the high-level planning.
Mike Myers' property. And, you know, there's no specific mention of anything else, right, within the plan. There's no, you know, this person's property or that person's property. But he specifically sent an email regarding my property. I don't mind high-level plans and talking generalities. That's fine. And like you said, you were talking about, you know, none of these things are certain for the future, right? These are all just plans. And that's what it comes right down to it in this case, in this hearing process, this legislative process, where we're talking about general plans. And I'm allowed to have my opinions and my bias. According to the information that I read, that's okay, and that's expected, right? But like I said before, that's when it comes down to my role as a planning commissioner, I have to look at the whole plan and not try to manipulate or modify anything for my personal benefit. And what I'm trying to pledge to you again is that I can do that. And I guess it's up to you to decide whether or not you think I can or can't, but I'm making that pledge that I can. And I think, you know, it's, like I said, it's a tough thing to balance between, well, what do I think he's going to do versus what is he going to do? And, you know, I think it tries to identify the fact that people that live in a planning area, this is common, right? That people live in planning areas and they're still on planning commissions. This is what the director of the OGEC had mentioned in one of his comments was. I find that, but he basically essentially said, you know, this happens all the time where planners are in the planning area. And so, not a reason to, remove them from.
So I have a quick question. I'm just going to jump in real quick. When you were appointed, right, we all talked about, I mean, there is no way around the fact that just by virtue of where your property is and the property that you own, there's a conflict. We could talk ad nauseum about whether it's potential or actual, whatever, right? But there's a conflict. There's an absolute conflict. And here's, when you were appointed, in my mind, and I have to go back, and I did not have time to go back and view the YouTube recording, but I thank you for citing it because it would have been helpful. I ran out of time. In my mind, and maybe I didn't share this, but in my mind, the way I saw that your participation in the Planning Commission go is that you were going to be on the Planning Commission, participate, do all the things. I had all the faith that you would do all the things that you said you were going to do here with us and talk about it. And then in my mind, right, I was like, okay, he's going to recuse himself from any vote, right? He could be part of the discussion because from what I understood your, the motivation for you joining the Planning Commission, right, was to bring a voice from outside an area that we weren't hearing, right, to advocate for some things that you thought maybe we weren't considering or didn't know, right, some other kind of concerns, be part of the process, right, and also just join because we had been saying, join with us, right, and so, to that credit, that's what I thought the motivation was. Here's where I have my question is. My understanding is that you had a conversation with Mike Weston in the fall, in November, whenever it was, and you talked about these conflicts. And at that point, had you said you would or would not recuse yourself? Had that been discussed?
We were talking about recusing. I
Okay.
just came to him and I said, I just want to make sure that, I've had these conversations, like, I had a conversation with Amy, I had a conversation with Joe. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything that's going to violate conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the point is I don't want to be, sit on the sidelines all this time. And then at the end, not being able to participate in the hearings.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, I'll talk to Peter Wallstaff.
Okay.
And I didn't hear anything further until, we decided we wanted to have this workshop. And, Mike pointed out in his letter to the OGEC how, I had asked for this workshop, which was a concern for his. And then 2 days later, and so we have a workshop, and then a day later, he's talking to Peter Watts or talking to you or doing whatever. And then on the second day, he's talking to the OGEC. So obviously, he felt like, this workshop was going to be a problem. And again, you said when we had this appointment process, that you felt like I was going to be part of the discussions. Well, if I have an actual conflict of interest, I can't even be a part of the discussions, right? I can't even be a part of a discussion regarding it. So if there's an actual conflict, and it says so in the OGEC letter, I can't be a part of discussions if I have an actual conflict of interest. So you envision me having discussions where we didn't have a good, solid understanding of ethics laws.
Sure, yeah.
And so, and this has been one of my points too along the way is, where's the training, right? OGEC has recommended that the entire King City take part in OGEC training.
Mm-hmm.
She was giving me some analogies of things, and I'm like, oh, God, that sounds like that could be a conflict, or this could be a conflict. And she goes, well, I recommend the city take our training.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great idea. I don't think that I would be making this potential conflict of interest statements that I'm supposed to be making and saying that I can make a unbiased decision if I hadn't had this conversation with the OGEC. I think that I probably would have slipped through the cracks, and I probably would have been in violation for not saying I don't do this. So I think the training is really important from a lot of different levels, from level, OGEC, the LOC training that we were supposed to get. It was talked about back in June. We're a week away hearings today.
Mm-hmm.
And policy training's been, I mean, it was supposed to happen like during this meeting. That's the last I heard. So, I mean, if I'm gonna remain on the planning commission, then the LOC training for a public hearing that's coming up, we're not educated on the process. And it's a week away. I think that's a concern.
Sure. I appreciate that. So at the point that you were approached, though, and said, hey, we think there's a conflict. We want you to recuse yourself from the hearings.
When was that? That was like a week ago? I don't know.
6 weeks ago, maybe? That was before at least the last
And it was
city
coming
council.
with, you know, dates and
Sure,
stuff.
and I don't think it's, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, whether it was 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you know, whatever. But I would like to better understand your resistance to not recusing yourself from the hearings.
My resistance is, so once I've been made aware of the fact that there could be a problem, I've educated myself.
Okay.
I learned from the OGEC what the attorney said. And then, you know, making a determination of, do I need to recuse myself? And based on everything that I see and I read and the advice that I've gotten, says that I don't need to, because it's a potential conflict of interest, and I don't need to recuse myself because it's a legislative process. If it's a quasi-judicial process, then I would need to recuse, because I'm specifically identifying the action that would involve one of my properties, and then I would have to say,
Right. But if this body disagrees with you, and I think this is where the issue is, right, is that our responsibility is to the city, to the record of this process, to the hearings, to ensuring that we are doing everything appropriately, thoughtfully, transparently, right? We have tried very hard to go. So when we come to you and say, right, Kate and I both admitted that there were things that we didn't contemplate back during your appointment. And that now, with hindsight, maybe we should have thought about it, but we didn't. And we have held our hands up and said, I didn't think about the detriment, you know, the avoidance of detriment concept, right?
because,
And I'm an attorney. Why?
and you had OGEC training, right? So I think.
So, hold on, Mike. So, but my point is that at the point that we are raising those concerns to you, is it not enough for us to say, you know, we can split hairs a little about what type of conflict it is, but at the base, you and I both agree that there just is a conflict. It was a concern that we had two appointment hearings, process, whatever, meetings, right? We talked about it at length. And what my concern specifically is that, you know, with hindsight, could we have done things differently? Maybe. Should we have thought about things and we hadn't? I'm happy to say that that's probably true. But here in the now, when we came and said, we have a real concern, here's our concerns, and you flatly have said you will not recuse yourself now, right? And so that leaves it in a very difficult position.
So there is a conflict. That's absolute. There is a conflict. But it's not splitting hairs when you're talking about potential versus actual. It's two separate things. So I have to go.
But a potential conflict can very quickly and easily become an actual conflict. It is not determined on a point in time,
I didn't read
or
that in.
I don't think you need money in your pocket. So,
I did read that in the OGEC advice letter.
okay.
So they very specific regarding potential and actual conflict. Bottom line is, I understand the difference between potential and actual.
Mm-hmm.
This is the advice, I read the advice letter. I've spoken to an attorney, said it's only potential.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, cited some case law and some legal appeals and whatnot, different things that have transpired. All I can say is based on the advice I've gotten from my OGC, my attorney, from what I've read, and my pledge to unbiased manner, that I don't feel that there is a necessity for me to recuse myself. So based on that, I feel like I can continue to do my job as a planning commissioner, and I would like to remain.
I would like to read from OGEC, just because this is a public meeting, and I just want everyone to know what we're talking about. So I would just like to read on the second page, bottom paragraph, the distinction between an actual and potential conflict. The distinction between an actual and potential conflict of interest rests on the certainty of the financial impact if the matter under consideration could result in a financial impact, positive or negative, on the planning commissioner, but that financial impact is not certain, then the planning commissioner would have a potential conflict of interest. On the other hand, if the matter being considered would result in a certain financial impact on the planning commissioner, then the planning commissioner would have an actual conflict of interest. For an elected public official or one serving on a board or commission, the type of conflict, actual or potential, will determine how the public official discloses and handles their conflict of interest. And I thought it was important to read what OGEC says, so that it's clear that what you're saying
On page 3.
is not your words, and what you're saying is not your words. So that we have all of that. And then the onus is on the commissioner to determine whether there is a potential or actual conflict of interest. And then after that declaration, it would be on anybody else to determine whether or not we agree. And that's where the potential for like an ethics complaint would come in. If anyone were to say, I have a potential conflict, and other people thought, no, it's actual, or vice versa, right? It's some other situation. So my understanding is that it is up to you as a commissioner to decide whether or not the conflict is actual or potential.
Because on page 3, it says, in this situation, the planning commissioner will need to determine what type of conflict of interest they have. For each of the meetings, work session, or public hearing, the planning commissioner will need to make a public announcement of the nature of the conflict of interest. So, you know,
Right.
I've determined that it's a potential conflict of interest, and, I'm making the pledge. And I guess you can only either trust what I'm saying, or distrust what I'm saying, and make a determination based on that, whether you trust me or you don't trust me, because that's basically what it comes down to. And then, you know, if I violate that trust, then, you know, that's it.
Well, and I think that's the more, right, and this is hard because, right, I really like you as an individual, so this isn't personal to you as an individual. The difficulty I have is with this situation, if you're wrong, the consequences to you are what they are. They are not that, you know, significant, right? There could be an ethics complaint. I mean, I don't actually know. Do they have monetary fines for ethics? Like, what's the ramification for
There can be.
So, I mean,
So what we're trying to do is mitigate legal risk.
right, and that was what sorry, just real quick, Peter, that is what I was gonna say, is that the consequence to you individually, if you're right or wrong, are not that dire, right? There could be some impact. The consequence for us, if we get it wrong, is allowing the record to be, impacted.
We get remanded, you know, it could, again, potentially, depending on what happens and who has a problem with it, anything that any of the planning commissioners say or anything that you say at a hearing can either create legal risk or help mitigate legal risk, which is sometimes why we ask you to make specific findings or to determine something. Because when you do, then we have it on the record, everyone understands, and it takes away a legal argument that could be made to or whomever. So again, if we're talking about purely legal risk, if every meeting we're relying upon someone to determine if they have a potential or actual conflict of interest, and then we're left with that record, and later in time, or immediately after the hearing, somebody comes in and says, this is an actual conflict of interest because that road would give him an extra 5 net developable acres or 2 or whatever it is, or take away this, or this will do that. It's just creating grounds for appeal. And then frankly, it's like, did that advocacy result in other people making the determination that they did, if that person should have recused themselves from the process? And so I guess, you know, I wouldn't want Mike to be fined or to have a news story or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But more, my concern is how can we get through this process as cleanly as possible, knowing that I picked up the phone in 2017 when Mike called me about working on this process, and, you know, we went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court. So it's around 6 years later. Council looks different than it looked back then. Some familiar faces, but some new ones. And, you know, I would hope that we could get through this process in the next year and a half. I've talked to Joe Gaon Schwabi, who's representing Carla Bankston and them. There are going to be some legal complications, and there's another attorney who's representing certain members of the Rivermead. She's very clear that certain members, not everyone. But litigation seems likely, and frankly, anything we can do to prevent that is something that I would like to do, because I am tired of litigating this case. And then, you know, anything we can do to demonstrate to those attorneys that we're not creating a legal issue so they're not going to win is also what I want to do. Because the easiest problem to solve is a problem you don't have.
Set the stage for, you brought this to everyone's attention, and you have concerns. So I guess in the future, I think that would be worth something, wouldn't it? As far as our own protections. We've thoroughly vetted this planning commissioner. How long have we been here?
A long time, yeah.
An hour and a half,
Mhm.
hour and 20 minutes. We asked all the pertinent questions, and we did our best to try to vet out, you know, which way this guy might go.
Mhm.
And all I can say is, these are the rules, these are the set of rules that are established. Instead of follow those rules, I intend to act in the unbiased manner when it comes to any kind of recommendation. And I'm making that commitment. You guys have vetted it, I've vetted it on my end. And
But I guess I don't feel like my question is answered though. Why is it important to you to participate in the hearing portion of this process?
that's the most important part of the process.
Okay.
It's the most important part of the process. Up to this point,
Mhm.
and then the most important process is when you all make the decision. So again, I'm not the decision maker on this. I'm one of 7 that makes a recommendation. Then you all decide. So, you know, the decision is yours.
So just me, I'm not gonna speak to anyone else. So me saying to you, I am really concerned with setting us up for some significant consequences. And I have I take my duty to the citizens of this city very seriously, right? They deserve to have the cleanest hearing record, the cleanest process record. We have been at this for years. Everyone deserves for us to get through this, right? Finish what we're doing, right? We paused to reevaluate based on the feedback that we got. So we added a whole other year of all of this, right? We know this long drawn out process, right? Here we are at the finish line. And I am saying to you, I have very, very significant concerns that have dire consequences for us, not so much dire consequence for you. asking you to recuse yourself so that we can avoid and mitigate those dire consequences, why is it important for you to not recuse yourself and to participate at the hearing? That's where I'm just not getting it.
Why is it important for the other 6 commissioners?
So the other 6 commissioners aren't sitting here having this problem and don't have a conflict. You are the only one that has the conflict that you have, right? And we've talked about it ad nauseum. I'm not going to go around and around, but that's why the other 6 aren't sitting here.
Okay. I mean, they must feel it's important. I feel it's important. I mean, I think, other than where I live, you know, how can I answer that question any differently than any of the others? I don't, because it's extremely important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Is it
know.
more important than avoiding potential legal action or impeding the plan moving forward? That's the question. Is it more important for you to participate on record, or is it more important for you to see the plan move forward?
And this is where wearing both hats, this is where it comes down to it, right? Is because for me, the way that I take this is that it is important to you because you own this parcel of land, you've been participating in this process, but you've had your voice been heard, you've brought all the alternatives forward that the discussions have already been had, the community, the meetings, the reading, all of that has been in there, right? Now there's a vote on the record, which is symbolically important. I'm not saying that the vote is not important, but in the best interest of the city is to be risk adverse, try to mitigate potential areas for litigation, have a clean record. That's what's in the best interest of the city, right? And where I'm having a hard time is, it seems like you as landowner, right? It's in your best interest to be part of I don't know. I'm having a hard time reconciling the vote.
So, I mean, as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking also about representation, right? So there's a whole area of expansion is larger than the current size of the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also about representation. So I'm the one person that represents the 528 acres on either the council or the planning commission. And so I guess when I'm listening to this and trying to think about, why is it important to me? Important to me, and I think it's important to everybody that lives west of 37. So I think that's important. I think off the top, right?
Sure, no, I understand, but I think really at the base of it, that to me, so, right, like, I've sat here before, right? I live on Capulet. Capulet is within the TSP that's being considered for certain things. I've never publicly talked about my personal view as being an individual landowner on a road that's within this system, right? I've never made those comments publicly. Very few people know what my personal opinion is as to my own personal property, because as a council member and as the mayor, it's completely immaterial to what my job is here, right? However, I know very well what your opinion is as to the impact to your neighborhood, your land, your surrounding area, your personal property, the entire area that you just said that you represent with your neighbors of the UVG, right? I understand, and we've talked about it for years, right, of that. And I think that's the difficulty, right? But here, when we are coming to you and saying, we have real concern, to me, it feels like the ability to bifurcate those two things, right? You as a landowner and you as planning commissioner is too great a task, right? The risk, I have a really hard time with the risk that it represents. And we've tried to, yeah, go ahead.
Do you trust your fellow planning commissioners to represent people who live in the urban growth area.
Answer. I don't know. I mean, I haven't had personal conversations with them. I don't know what their stance is or how much, they've gotten into the materials. I held up the planning commissioner handbook the other day at the planning commission meeting. I said, anybody recognize this? And nobody recognized it. And I said, we have a very, I made a statement, we have a very important responsibility coming upon all of us to make sure that we, have read the regulation analysis, the TSP, and all these things. And one of them said, I think it's time to move on. So, a couple of them were a little curt to me during that meeting. So I would say that I can't wholeheartedly say, yes, I trust them to make the right decision. Because I had that experience. That was completely inappropriate to be curt with me when I was trying to explain my ODEC dilemma that I was going through and try to explain myself. And I made that statement about, making sure that we take responsibility for understanding the material and being told, well, I think it's time we need to move on here. Very curtly, I didn't appreciate that. And so I don't know, I can't.
You don't feel that you're the only person who can represent anyone who lives outside of, sorry.
I would hope not. But I think that the mere fact of where I physically live. I think you all felt that when I was appointed to the planning commission. Don't feel that way. I still think that, one person is important, at least one. So I don't know. We could go on probably all night long.
Right.
I'm going to take my stance. My bottom line stance is like a following the OGEC process. Professional attorney, as suggested by Peter Wells. And I feel like I can conduct myself in an unbiased manner, and I've tried to. I've been a planning commissioner very long, but I've been involved in a couple of hearings, and I think I've demonstrated multiple behavior. And I'm just going to make a pledge that I do so throughout the remainder of this process. So, the bottom line is, we have to make a decision on whether or not we want to take me or dismiss me. So.
Peter, is there, for any other councilors want to say anything or ask any
Yes,
questions?
go ahead.
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Again, like we always say, when you want to be part of the solution, you got to be part of the discussion, part of everything. So I appreciate you stepping up to be part of the planning commission and what we look forward to in the future of the King City. So you are the fourth generation, right? What?
I'm number 5.
Number 5. So 1890, right?
1880.
1880. Okay. So now, all the while it has been kept in the family line for the pride, for everything that comes with it, right? And that's what you are here trying to kind of voice and say, yes.
I care about the area.
You care, yes, you do care about the area. And the option you're given is look somewhere else or look at something else, right? And the one thing we all know as humans is the moment you tell someone to look somewhere else, that person on the other side that you say to look will now step up and say, no, look somewhere else. It will just be a cycle that will never get out of, And so where would you think your, how many grades, is it 4 grades? Yeah. What do you think they would like to do if they were in your position right now to kind of say, I want to see myself in the future, the story of this King City development being done. What would you think they would kind of today if they look at it? The family prayer you've held and the pride and everything that you've held, when this is all done, at some point with the park and everything, the edging of the family thing still remains, and the story that we told will still be part of everything that we told about what your family has been and where they have been, what they have done. So what would you say is there where they want in this situation right now?
What my great-great-grandfather would say in this situation. First of all, if they were grandson here all of a sudden, they'd be completely shocked. But I think they would. Tough question. I think that they would. I would think that I would be. I'm the voice of them, right? I would think. Okay. So I think that they would be saying what I'm saying, and that is, I want to stay here. Stay here for a long, long time. I see King City grow. I mean, I guess I've been saying the same thing. You know, I want it to be a great place to live. I want to be a part of that. So when you suggest I not be a part of that, and you take away the representation.
So thank you for your answer. That's what I was looking for, right? Because now you want to be part of that, the whole process.
Oh, absolutely.
And abiding by what it is, and have you to abide by, and what the policies and the guidelines are that are out there.
Absolutely.
You know? So again, like everyone is just saying here, we just want to make sure we're not setting ourselves up for any kind of failure in the future, right? That's what we're looking
I want King City to succeed, right? I'm not trying to be subversive or sabotage something or sabotage a process or set you up for an appeal or anything else. And, you know, I make a pledge.
And this right here, the whole process we're going through right now is in the records, right? So that also kind of builds towards,
Yes.
you know.
John? Sorry, well, sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you looked, yeah, I thought it was like a final, but I just thought it was
Thank you.
I wanted to revisit a question that Councilor Moore asked earlier, and that was, would there be any plan that involved any piece of your property that you would agree with? And knowing that you have no plans to sell, right? And knowing that the city has said there's no plans for eminent domain, would that keep you from approving a plan where something is showing on a map that your property would be affected by?
Well, I think that would become later, in more specific
Right.
Circumstances, where we're starting to get more specific after the general
Right.
Process that we're going through right now. But absolutely, you know, in the future, if I'm still on the planning commission, I will have to recuse myself because it will be apparent that there's some or bound to happen. So then I would have to recuse myself of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's comforting to hear you saying that you would recuse yourself in a situation like that.
Yes,
You know, you're on record saying that, so that
absolutely.
is comforting personally.
Just based on everything that I know about this process right now, and the information that I have, the advice that I've gotten, I don't feel that I need to recuse myself. But in other situations, when we get into other processes, then absolutely, yes, I'll have.
Any other councilor comments or questions? All right, I'm going to hand it over to you guys. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon that we need to, or is there anything that you feel that we need to elaborate on, or?
No, I mean, I think that, I just think that any scenario that involves an east connector is going to have some impact on the property because it's net developable acres. Whether or not over the next 10 years, it's 150th to Roy Rogers and that none of these properties get touched or what have you, it still is impacting net developable acres regardless of where the alignment is. And, you know, that's something that I tried to articulate to OGC when I had a conversation, and we couldn't get past the, well, if you participate then people should file a complaint. Because again, my view is, if somebody has to file a complaint, something's gone terribly wrong.
Right.
And then we're going to have another hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and I think that Mike's done a good job of trying to educate himself on the law and his rights. And I think it's very unfair that he can't get a fixed determination, but that's how it is. And, you know, I'm personally not filing any complaints with OGC, but I also kind of don't want to have multiple hearings because that happens. And as Mike says, virtually every property owner west of 150th wants to get through this process as efficiently as possible because they want to develop. It's hard for me to think of a scenario where a complaint doesn't get filed. And, you know, that's, I guess, those are my concerns. But, you know, it's up to you as a city council to determine what's best for the city and ultimately how to most successfully get through the process.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So if Mr. Meyer stays on the planning commission, if we approve a plan that has roads going through his property, parks on his property, also Disneyland on his property, but he never sells, then where would the ethics complaint come in? Because that's up to him to sell his property. So he's just,
Well, so let's talk about zoning. So if zoning can dramatically impact the value of property. So, there was an article in Atlanta Week where the OLCC paid something like $1.2 million an acre for, industrial land in Canby. That's substantially more than, residential land is trading for in Canby. Right, and so a property owner that participates in a decision to zone their property industrial versus residential, that under the current market conditions, that absolutely impacts.
But your other distinction, that's quasi-judicial proceeding and not legislative because you're talking about zoning.
Well, we're talking about a comp plan map for an entire area. So the TSP is one element of your comp plan. You're going to have to amend your comp plan to include zoning, and the way that's done is called bubble zoning. So we have colors on the map. You've seen it before, it's called the charrettes. And then that zoning is what you vote for. But what you just saw, which was Mike interrupting me in order to make a point, was I think exactly why the planning commission got a little curt with the meeting, is that he was trying to create his record as far as his prior involvement and that he could participate in this cleanly, which I understand. And he was quizzing me on different elements of the law and conflicts and all those things, which I'm happy to answer. But we were unable to get through my training. The training that normally lasts an hour, we were like close to 2 hours in, and we hadn't been able to get through it all. And I think that's why they were getting frustrated, is because if you were to watch the tape, the amount that they were able to speak during that process versus the amount that Mike spoke, and, you know, I spoke a lot too, I think they were getting frustrated because we were getting kind of far afield and they just wanted to get through the training. And so I think that is my other concern, is that, you know, it's great that Mike's an opinionated guy and that he's done a lot of his own homework on stuff. But, you know, if that's resulting in multiple days of hearings versus one hearing, because we're getting further afield, that isn't necessarily an efficient thing for the city either. So it's like, how can we have a highly functioning planning commission that can get through this work? How can Mike judge before every hearing whether he can participate or not? What's the legal risk if he does versus he doesn't? These are all complications that come with owning property in the area that's being planned and zoned. And that will be the reality for anyone that owns property. If Metropolitan Land Group showed up and are like, we want to participate on the planning commission, we would be having the exact same conversation, because this road would impact their holdings too. Any developer, any property owner, maybe people that live immediately adjacent to this the river and are on urban levels of density already would be less impacted because they can't develop their property. But, you know, anyone with larger lots.
I think I've been quiet, but the one point that I would just bring up, and I put this in my letter to Commissioner Myers as well, is that his property is central to the whole area. It's from 150th all the way down to the river. There's no crossing that doesn't cross his property.
Mhm.
There's no avenue, no pathway that's not going to have an impact to his financial gain or detriment. And so this is why I see it as an actual conflict of interest, and that's why we recommended him to recuse himself on this. That's my sense on it, and, you know, I appreciate his sincerity today and coming up here and speaking with us and everything else. That's all I have to say.
No. Mike, do you want any final words before we get into the awkward discussion about you while you're in the room, but can't really talk to us?
Well, you know, I just heard Mike Weston mention it's an actual conflict of interest. And I could just point out to the director of the OGEC says that it's very common for this to come up where people live in and own an area without being removed.
Mhm.
So, again, I guess there's a fear of what could happen in the process, but there's also realization of that there is the process. And, you know, there could be some fear regarding what could potentially happen. But I think that, GEC rules are pretty specific, and as I got from the attorney, pretty specific. Regarding actual versus potential. Read Mike Weston's letter to the OGEC pointing out concerns, and that was reviewed and determined that it could only be potential. I think it's only fair to have representation from the expansion area. You know, regarding what Peter Watt said regarding the training session, which, again, that workshop was not supposed to be a training session. It was supposed to be our planning commission meeting. Planning commission meeting workshop that we had all agreed to and thought we were going to get. And it turned into a training session. We wanted a roundtable discussion, and we didn't get that. Then we had Peter Watts talking for quite some time, and what I was trying to do was there was a lot of talk about quasi-judicial, and I was trying to steer it toward a process that was at hand, and that was the legislative process. Kind of steer it back to that and try to understand the process that we had at hand and what we needed to know for that time. So it was a frustrating experience. All I have. I remain on planning commission. And,
All right. I appreciate that, Mike, and we're here 2 hours. This was a long night. These are difficult conversations, especially since we live in a small community, right? These are hard, and, you know, we had started talking about this at the last council meeting. You weren't here, and we all felt that you needed to be part of this discussion. I know it was long, and, you know, I thank you for sitting here with us and being forthright and honest and, right, communicating with us. So, I think at this point, Mike is owed, I think, a decision tonight, whether we think that he should continue on with the planning commission, participate, and so forth. So, we've never really done this before. There isn't really a roadmap or a process. I will just share my personal feelings, and then I think we will just maybe all decide, and then we'll have to have a motion at the end of this, right? For me, I really appreciate Mike's participation in the Planning Commission. I think he's been a phenomenal commissioner and he certainly is very prepared and attends all the meetings, does all the things that we've asked of him. Where I can't get past is that while I appreciate that you have made the determination based on all the information that you have done and been given, right, that that you only have a potential conflict. All day long, I deal with conflict, right? I deal with disputes all day long. That's all I do. And when there is a dispute, there's either someone that's correct and there's someone that's wrong. And sometimes there's a combination of the two, right? But each side always believes they're right and believes that they have the correct information and that their analysis is the correct one. And where I come back to after all of this is that I don't think that it's responsible to allow such dire consequential issues with your participation in the hearings when really the motivation and your participation has brought up to this point, you've achieved the purpose that you set out to do by participating in the Planning Commission. And I understand that your recorded vote, right, is important, but it's not above the importance of avoiding dire consequences on behalf of this city. I'm just not willing to take that chance. And I think had it all gone the way that I wanted it to, which was, we could say to you, gee, Mike, there's some things that we didn't think about. We have a real concern. We'd like you to continue to participate, but just recuse yourself and then advocate for your own property as a landowner, participate in the hearings, but use the opportunity to simply participate as a landowner, not as a commissioner, right? Then, when the process is over, you can come back onto the Planning Commission and participate. And that's how I thought this was all going to go. I stupidly, maybe naively in my mind, even back when we were talking about your appointment, I really thought, okay, that's great, because it's hard for me. You have strong opinions, and your advocacy for your own property is very strong. And so I was always a little bewildered about why you would want to hamstring yourself into the Planning Commission process, because you can't advocate. You can't do the things that I was used to you doing and saying as a planning commissioner. And so in my mind, and I guess I naively just thought, all right, well, he's going to participate, he's going to do this, he's going to bring a different voice, then he'll recuse himself from, the actual proceeding part of it, but he can do the discussions right? And if I was wrong on my analysis, I was wrong, right? But now I can't reconcile that. I cannot get past the consequences and the motivation of not just stepping, if we're all saying we think for the best interest of the city, you should simply just sit this out. I'm having a hard time understanding why you wouldn't do that, right? And that's my position. So, unfortunately, we're at an impasse. And for me, I unfortunately think that you should no longer be a planning commissioner, because I don't think that we're going to be able to reconcile this to the point that you can continue to serve both roles, right? And in this process, your primary motivation has to be on behalf of the city and the best interest of the city, and I just don't think that it will be and I think it's not because you're choosing your own property above the city's. I think your analysis just makes it fraught for, if you're wrong, right, then the consequences are really bad, and it's that risk that I think is the real crux for me. It's, so, I will go down the line. Who wants to either share or discuss or?
I'll start.
Mhm.
My interpretation, I think I'm interpreting the OGEC definition of the difference between potential and actual differently than you are perhaps. What I read is that your conflict of interest is actual. There definitely will be a financial implication for your property, regardless of what the plan is. And by their definition, that's an actual conflict. So because of that, I think it would be best for you to no longer be on the planning commission, because there's no way to avoid that conflict of interest. It is actual. There will be an impact, whether it's negative or positive. No way to avoid that from everything that I've learned from this meeting and everything I've done. I wasn't sure if people were weighing in.
Yeah, I don't know
We can
if
have
we're,
discussion after a motion,
Yeah.
if we need to do that.
okay, do we want to, I mean, I can't,
We've talked
Let
about
me
this
make a
for
motion.
2 hours.
yeah.
I do not want you to not be on the planning commission. More than that, I do not want to set the city up for, any more liability. So I would like to make a motion to remove, Mike Myers from the planning.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so let's move into discussion. Does anyone want to discuss or make comments?
I mean, I kind of already touched on it, so, ORS 244-040-1 prohibits a public official from using or attempting to use their office or position to obtain a financial gain or avoidance of financial detriment for themselves, their relatives, or household members, or any businesses with which which any of them are associated, if that financial gain or avoidance of detriment would not otherwise be available but for the public official holding their office or position. That's kind of why I asked that question on the question he asked in his email. Would the city be willing to make a legally binding commitment that eminent domain will not be used at any time in the future? I'm not an attorney, but to me that sounds quid pro quo, and would go, against the ORS code. That's all I have.
Thank you. Lori, yep, go ahead.
I have to agree with the other counselors. Basically, the thing is that I think the hope when you came forward to be on the planning commission was just what you were hoping, to represent the area where you were living, in the Grove area. And in a perfect world, it would be continuing to be that role and would be helpful to us and also to the other commissioners on the planning commission. But I think this would be probably my problem too, but your property that's involved here, and it would be so difficult to separate yourself from looking at what's best for the city and what's best for yourself. And I, not to say anything that you were planning on doing anything or not doing anything, whatever, it's a very difficult position to be in, and to be able to step back and say, I'm not going to be participating in this because of the conflict. I think there's just, unfortunately, whether it's potential or actual, perceived or whatever, I think we just need to avoid that 100%. And not that you're not have been a great contributor, it's just a difficult position for all of us. And I just don't see that there's any way forward for you. I'm sorry.
Mark or Micah, any comments or?
I think I would echo what Kate said actually, in that, I mean, I don't want you not to be on the planning commission. I don't want that, but I also don't see any way to get past the conflicts without knowing that you would recuse yourself, which is your point is kind of the most important part of this. And because of that, I can't support you remaining on the commission if you can't recuse yourself from those decisions, because I do think that sets us up for future potential issues. And as much as it pains me to say it, I think I would have to agree with the other sentiments that have been expressed.
Bart, any comments?
Again, this is very, very hard, very challenging for us. We put ourselves in your shoes right now. I know it's going to be, we might take the same stance as you are doing right now, keeping the family property and protecting the environment in which you live. I kind of like the example you were given earlier, living in the area you live and then you don't kind of participate. And I live on Fisher Road, and people ask me all the time, you live on Fisher Road, and what do you have to say about the extension and everything else? And I just say, I just want to do it for the best interest of the city, right? And it's kind of a hard thing because I live on the Fisher Road, and it impacts everyone, it will impact me as well. So how do I pull myself out of it? Just leave it to the planning commission, I leave it to the people that are planning and trust their judgment. They're the experts, they're the SMEs, they know what they're doing. And that's where the challenge comes for us right now, because again, you did mention you really want to be on the planning commission. And you've read all the information, you know what to do now. But again, the challenge really comes down to, if we don't have representation from that side of the future expansion, how do we go about it? Because the question of act if you trust the other commissioners, the decision they're making will be to fair, on behalf of people on the other side. I mean, a lot of times we've seen that decisions have been made without someone being part of it, and they end up being a situation that everyone has to either live with it or they struggle with it, you know. So, yes, this is a very hard one, very, very hard for everyone. I mean, I've met you, chatted, we've talked about things, you know, but for me, I'll say right now it's kind of a hard decision for me. Because again, I really want to have representation from that side. I don't want them to feel like we've made all decisions without them being part of it.
Sure.
But again, it's very hard.
Yeah. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, so I think at that, we will take a vote. All those in favor say aye, or raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed? Motion carries. So, Mike, I'm sorry it came to this. This is certainly not what we wanted. And, I thank you for sitting through all of this. And, right, I hope there's a path forward for us all. I want you to continue to participate. Your voice is important, right? But I'm sorry that, this came down to it. So, all right. You have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for your service on.
All right, moving on to number C, award of the RFP for King City Community Park Landscape Maintenance Service. And Mike, you're presenting? Okay. Okay.
So we received 3 bids for landscape service at the park. Those 3 bids were from Andrea's Landscape Service out of Oregon City, present in the audience here. We also had Brightview, which is currently providing services at the King City Municipal Park. And then we had Pacific, who also provides service to the Edgewater community. Of the 3, we had them ranked Andrea Pacific and Brightview based on our evaluation on, cost for services, and the plan that was proposed, and, overall value. So with the Andreas plan, we saved nearly $12,000 to $13,000 a year per plan and get additional services. We had 58 call-outs. Brightviews was 120 with 52 call-outs. Pacific's was 122 with 52 call-outs. So we get a week's worth more service and $12,000 to $13,000 under the nearest bid. So I added some extra for that. I also felt that they were a minority-owned business, a local business, and they weren't a larger enterprise. So Brightview has been doing a great job for us, and they are region and national. Pacific has been doing a great job for Edgewater. They are phenomenal to work with and have been great, and they're regional. And then you have Andreas, who is a local startup who has their own business over in Oregon City and seems to be well equipped to handle what we're trying to ask them to do. And it was our opinion from the 3 scores to give Andreas a nod and see if they can carry it. More than happy to give you all the evaluation sheets if you want to study them and go through them in more detail.
Yes, please.
All right. And then, I know we had it on there today to try to make a decision, but,
And while we're looking at that, thank you for sitting through this very difficult, very hard meeting tonight. And I appreciate you sticking with us and letting us handle that.
They're also online.
I'm sorry?
Brightview's online and
What do you mean by online?
Do we not participating in Zoom? So we also,
down to scores, the final scores that you have on the one sheet.
so I'll just take this opportunity too to thank those representing the other landscaping companies on Zoom and participating in the meeting and getting through this. This was a lengthier meeting, rightfully so, but,
If you'd like, you can read the individual scores and then the accumulated.
yeah.
Okay, so for the scoring, Brightview, I don't know what the acronyms are, but for MW, they scored 82. RS was 71.
Mike or Ronnie, can you give us what the abbreviations mean?
Ronnie.
Those are the
Yeah.
candidates. that-
Okay, and then Dave,
Oh,
and Dave Runyon. Okay. All right, so Brightview, Mike scored an 82, Ronnie a 71, Dave an 81. Total score was 234. Pacific Landscape, it was 89 score from Mike, 90 score from Ronnie, 94 from Dave Runyon for a total of 273. Andreas, spelled wrong here, Mike. Mike Weston was 89, Ronnie was 92, Dave was 95, for a total of 276. So there was 3 points that separated the two. As I kind of have a question, like if it's probably in here, and I obviously don't have time to go through it, but irrigation, that's going to be a big issue. What would be your commitment to response times, for making sure irrigation repairs, controllers, whatever?
Yes, I think I told Mike, we have we are not a big company, but we have like almost 60 employees.
Okay.
And in my company, we have 4 specialists in irrigation systems. Also, we do another commercial project around, and I have other people that we need to respond the next day or the same day when you guys need it.
Depending on what it is, okay. Yeah, so like you have other large commercial accounts kind of in this immediate area, so you would have a presence here at least once a week or something? Yeah, okay.
For those participating on Zoom, do they want an opportunity to respond to the same question?
I just want to say, when it came to the call-out fees, we asked them to come in and interview with us to go over maybe what an additional charge might be for a call-out or something to that effect. Andreas came in, best bidder on the aeration component,
Okay.
and then Brightview came in as a single mode, as probably the best. So there are pros and cons in each bid, and it was the weighted scores of all the different components of the proposals that they just barely put Andreas ahead of the competition. So I was really impressed with all three of them, though. They really brought their A game to this proposal, and we were very impressed and really appreciate the professionalism and the organization.
Right, absolutely.
That's always good.
I just asked how many years in business for you?
Yes, actually, I want to say something, Mayor. I'm from Colombia. I moved here 19 years ago, and I'm a lawyer in Colombia, and I was the mayor of my town. 1992, 1994. And see what happens today. I mean, I enjoy it because I don't do that anymore because I moved here for political asylum. Anyway, to answer your question, my company is 17 years.
17.
I created my company after the second year that I moved here.
Well, we thank you for your service to your community, even though you're no longer living in that community. Now you're part of ours, but we welcome you and thank you.
Thank you.
Any?
I asked them to unmute, but they haven't, so I'm assuming they don't want to talk.
Okay, we will just.
If you want, you can call out Nick Robertson.
Okay. We just want to be fair to Nick and the other representatives. Is there anyone from Pacific, or is it just?
Can see.
Okay. Well, those listening on the Zoom, if you want to be heard or provide an answer in addition to the questions being asked here in the room, then please unmute yourself or raise your hand. All right.
I was trying to see if maybe that.
This is Nick Robinson on the call right now with
Hi.
Brightview.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a little clunky with the hybrid model. So I don't know if you heard the question, but the question was concerning to, irrigation. What would your Mark, I don't want to rephrase it, but basically, response times to irrigation issues, how often would you be in the neighborhood or in the area to be able to respond to an urgent issue?
Right, we have a 24-hour emergency phone line for issues like that. And then we're right down the street from you, 10 minutes or so. So we can, quickly come out there. And if it's, like a major leak, we can turn the backflow off and then, fix the issue later if need be, or, it's a quick fix, we can fix it there. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions? Please move down.
Oh, I have one.
Sure. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I was just, for him specifically,
Or just,
how long is the contract for, Mike? 2 years. Sorry, you're gonna say that.
I'm just.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion if someone has a motion. Or if they need, okay, go ahead.
I motion to approve the contract with Andrea Landscaping proposed by the city.
Okay. Any second? Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and it's unanimous, none opposed. The motion carries. We appreciate it. Thank you, and congratulations, and we look forward to working with you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good night. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. And is it Nick? Is that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nick and Kurt, we also appreciate you hanging in there with us. This was a long meeting, and thank you for joining us for the evening and for your time tonight. Thank you. All right, moving on to, go
I
ahead.
would like to take brief recess.
All right, we will take a 3-minute bio break, as we call it sometimes, and we will be back on the record in 3 minutes. Thank you. Did Peter leave?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Discussed that perhaps due to timing, it might be beneficial to postpone each counselor's updates to the next meeting. I'd entertain a motion to apply that change to the agenda. I just want to highlight if anyone has any pressing business that they need to report on tonight, but otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we table our counselor reports until the next council meeting next month.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those approved?
I saw it raise his hand.
All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, so the agenda will be modified and council, mayors and councilors' reports will be tabled until the next meeting. Chief, let's hear your report, and then we'll let Mike Weston give his report, and then we can adjourn.
I'll be real quick, April 22nd, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is DEA Drug Take-Back Day. We will participate.
Oh, good. Yes.
Available here.
April 22nd.
April 22nd.
April 22nd.
Okay.
All right, so everyone,
I
April
was having a lot.
22nd from, remind us the times again?
10 to 2.
10 to 2. Please bring your unwanted medications to the City Hall for DEA Drug Take-Back. Wonderful. It's been a while, and it's very frustrating because the Walgreens on 99 constantly has their box for drug return locked because
Yeah.
it's full, and it's
Yeah.
very frustrating. So
There's a lot of places, I think Kaiser had one, and they.
same with the Rite Aid, exactly. It's-
Yeah, they stopped taking them.
Yeah. So I look forward to that. Thanks, Chief. What else?
Also,
Yeah.
April 1st is blood drive,
Oh, yeah. April 1st, blood drive.
and then April 30th is shred day.
April 30th is Shred Day. What time, Ronnie, is the blood drive?
Be 9 to 45.
9 to 2:45 on April 1st will be the blood drive here or in the KCCA parking lot? Okay. And will they need to make appointments?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to sign up to look for the announcements out on social media and by email. And please grab a slot. Last time we figured this out, right? We got,
Oh, in January?
and yeah, our blood drive in January was full.
Yeah, it was full. We were booked. I can't remember off the top of my head how many lives we saved. But we had 26 donations. Right now, we're at 18. Or, well, yesterday we were at 18. We're hoping to get 36.
Great, wonderful. All right. And then the shred event is on April 30th. What's the time of the shred event? Do we know yet? And will we, like our shred events in the past, will we also be doing a canned food drive or a, okay. So please drop off your shreds, your shredding, but bring some non-perishable goods to donate to the food pantry. Wonderful. That will be here. Mm-hmm.
And last thing, and it just falls under, this is like crazy luck. So we launched officers in carrying Narcan in the vehicles, naloxone for opioid overdoses. Just crazy good time. 2 days after the launch, we had a sale.
Oh, wow.
And so
Right on Shakespeare.
Oh, I didn't even,
So,
wow.
I'll try to, another award will be coming, that's Officer Cotillo, our new officer,
Great.
that was able to do that. That literally, I put it in the cars on Wednesday and saved the guy fresh.
Wow, amazing.
So, it's a 4 milligram nasal spray that's blasted in their nose. Back in my day when we started, it was with a needle. So it's a little bit easier and it's like silly easy training, right? It's pretty easy. You know? And so, just wanted to give a shout out to him. That award will be forthcoming.
Wonderful.
May would be my guess. That is all I got. Ronnie, do I need anything else?
Is it appropriate also to do a mention of congratulations for maybe another KCPD person who might have completed some training recently? Can we announce that or no? Is it,
This executive training.
is that something we share or?
Well, everybody's gotten certificates here lately, so it's, we're paying out more money. keeps going up. So Lieutenant Stigler just received his executive, certificate, which is, he's done now, right? He's got all 6 certificates like I do. So we're good there with him. We had, Officer Kevin Murphy got his advance. Well, his,
It just came.
his just came in, so he's got his advanced certificate, and they're going got, she's intermediate, and I think she's also up, well, actually, I think she's advanced also. So for, the top 4 people here, and 2 of us are max, the other 2 are, halfway through. And that's just what I'm. Uniforms is basic, intermediate, advanced, and then there's supervisory, management, and executive certificate.
Great.
Shout out to them, that everybody's kind of more, it gets them a little bit more. You need to see the small department because, quite honestly, when I was here and we weren't giving any kind of percentages to everybody, I was like, why bother? And then I had to hustle and literally snag 4, pretty quick, right? And so it got your way up.
Right.
It behooves you to do it and not be lazy like I. So, anyway, yeah.
Well, congratulations to all the officers and the good work that you're doing, so, thank you.
Really quick. Master plan coming up next week.
TSP.
9/13.
Yes.
Man, mine's a little burned here. So, the transportation system plan is coming forward next Wednesday. Staff report is out online. We received about 112 pages worth of public comments that are with the packet.
Yeah, about 111.
Yeah, so those are included with the packet. Anything that comes in from now to, next Wednesday will be presented to the planning commission, after planning commission. Hopefully we can get through it in a day, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We will have our number going out front, so it's gonna be pull a number and we'll fill out, note cards and with name, number, address, and any sort of exhibit will go with that, so that we can keep it all organized and put it into a file for moving forward. We have no passports Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday next week, in case the hearing takes all 3 days. Hopeful that it won't take all 3 days, but we have it just in case.
If it doesn't, are you able to add passports back in? I guess you could since we're not.
I mean, yeah, if we're all done, we could potentially take some passports on, Thursday or Friday, if necessary.
So just to confirm, this is for the planning commission, not the city council?
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and then it will take us, we have to, once that's done, we have to build the record, right, the planning commission's, recommendation, and then we'll send out another public notice to everybody in the city that it will be coming to city council. And so they'll have another hearing before you, likely in May, right? But in the month of April, we're also going to do master plan, public hearing before the planning commission, full day, toward the end of April as well. So master plan in April, TSP in March, TSP in May to the city council, and master plan to the city council in June. So it's back-to-back months for the next 4 months, long hearing. And just let you prepare yourself for that.
Yep. Anything?
Budget's coming out of 2, so we have budget mixed in there as well.
When's the do we have the budget meeting scheduled?
Yeah, we just put the schedule together.
Okay. Do we have the date? Because
I do have them, I'll send them out to you.
so if you can send them out, I can block off, because I wasn't able to attend the last budget committee meeting, but, hopefully I can get the time off, right? So,
Yeah, I think it was like May 11th or 13th or something to that effect.
okay.
13th is a Saturday.
Okay,
Yeah.
May 2nd, and then May 11th.
Okay.
Yeah, so May 11th if needed.
May 2nd is the first budget committee.
Yep. I think so.
And is that scheduled in the morning?
Yes. Oh, no, I have it, May 3rd, from 9:30 to noon.
Wednesday?
All right,
So May 3rd is the first one, and then May 11th if needed.
all right. Anything else?
No.
All right, so, before I call for a motion to adjourn, I just want to acknowledge this really difficult evening. I really appreciate, these are just really hard, things to go through, and, you know, I can only ask of all of, you know, we are all just trying to do our best here and do what we think is in the best interest, and those are really hard decisions sometimes, and they're unfortunate, and I just really thank everyone for being honest and straightforward, and for your listening and participating and getting to it, because this was a really hard meeting tonight, you know. I think we all really respect and appreciate Mike Meyer. I don't think that was the outcome that any of us really wanted. It was a difficult one, and so I think everyone's commitment to the city, commitment to just doing what we think is right? So, with that, I will entertain.
Oh, I have one.
Oh, sorry. Mhm.
First of all, I want to apologize for being late tonight.
Oh.
But, secondly, I did miss the approval of January's minutes.
Oh, okay.
I have a correction,
Okay.
hopefully. It says that I was unexcused by the death in the family, and
Oh, yeah.
I had you excused.
right, it just shows in the minutes that I was unexcused.
Oh,
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, no.
If nobody
And
else-
both, both Shauna, and
I didn't even know.
Shauna and Kate were both excused because it was planned vacation and a death in the family.
Okay.
Thank you.
Reminder that.
All right.
Amend our motion for that or not?
Got it.
So I think officially, we should probably, someone needs to officially make a motion to amend the minutes.
Yep.
Does someone want to do
I
that?
would like to make a motion to amend.
All the motion.
Oh, to recall the motion.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, all right, Robert.
Good job. Good
Make a motion to recall the motion to approve the minutes.
The January minutes,
All
yeah.
right,
Second.
all right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now,
Make a
there we go.
motion to approve January's minutes to replace unexcused for Counselor Thompson and I with excused, please. Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I would like to make a motion to approve the amended January minutes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any?
There we go.
All right. Okay. Bring us around. Bring us home.
Oh,
Do your last motion.
quick question.
Sure.
So now do we have an opinion of planning commission then that we will be open to?
I just leave it open.
Yeah, I think Mike, for the vacancy on the planning commission now, what, are you going to post the vacancy? What,
Yeah, we'll probably need to jump on that. Well, I'd like to set up a mechanism for how we go through the process this time.
yeah.
If y'all don't mind.
Do we need a committee? I feel like we need
I
some,
mean, if we had a couple weeks, we could put together a system
yeah.
and open it up. So I would say give us a couple weeks. It's gonna be crazy busy for us over this next week and probably the week after. We'll try to get on it as soon as we can, and then, that announcement out, develop the process for the interview. And, what I would prefer is if we had a work session style, like roundtable, where we bring them in and interview them,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can have, council have already interviewed them, and we can come to a city council meeting.
Yeah.
And then you all can make your motion
Yeah.
based on your own interview session.
I'd like that. I just think our process has been clunky, it, you know, certainly, like, we learned a lot with some of the, right, the difficulty, but we talked about at our goal session that we wanted to, you know, get a really streamline and figure out what the exact process is for these appointments, because they're important, and it's embarrassing when we have clunky bumps through them, right? So, all right. Any other, so that would be, I guess what do you put it?
Do a work session.
A work
We have
session,
to do
yeah.
a work session to do the interviews,
Yeah.
right?
Before the
meeting.
meeting, that's fine, yeah. I think that makes sense. I think that's a good way to do it. And then we need like consistency across all candidates, right? Because that was my biggest gripe, was that, so like, you know, we need to make sure that all candidates are treated equally and like, right, same questions and things like that. So, all right, we'll have that discussion at the next council meeting, all right? Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, take it away, or Micah, Michael's right there, all right, let's do it.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, all right, all those approve, or in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right, we are adjourned, thank you, everyone.